Welcome to Psychology Today. I'm your host, Ann Morrow, and thank you for watching. This is a show about bicycling and specifically about bicycle safety. I hope that Psychology Today helps you as a bicyclist be more mindful of safety, and if you're not cycling yet, I hope that it inspires you to ride a bike. We try to celebrate people in our community who have chosen careers that involve bicycling or entrepreneurial endeavors, and those that maybe just strive to encourage others to ride, and those that support cycling and promote safe riding. Before we meet our guest, I want to be sure and thank our crew in the back room here. They're having a good time, but thanks to them, and thank you to our producer, Northwest Bicycle Safety Council. I am the president of Northwest Bicycle Safety Council, and we've had a busy year with bike safety fairs, making sure that particularly younger riders know how to safely ride a bike, and most importantly, have a helmet fit properly on their little noggins so that their brains are protected. We're looking into the year 2018 already, trying to plot out how we're going to continue to benefit our community and place helmets on heads. So our guest is Michael Sylvester. He's a native Oregonian and a lover of cycling. And I don't know about you, but maybe you've been out on a ride and somebody's complaining, oh, my neck hurts or my back hurts, or maybe they just say, oh, this ride is beating me up. I've got to stop and take a break. Well, Michael might have the answers to those kinds of complaints and end all that whining from either yourself or your friends. So let's meet our guest, Michael Sylvester. Thanks for joining us, Michael.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So we're going to, I always like to start with a little history. So if you've been here in the Portland metro area for a while, why don't you tell us a little bit of history about yourself?
Born in Portland, grew up out by Damascus, was an athlete, runner through high school and college, and then kind of found the bicycle. Had an older brother that got me into the bicycle, and away I went on an adventure with him. So that was the beginning of my relationship with the bike.
And why don't you tell us a little bit about your cycling saga, because you've been busy on the bicycle.
Busy on the bicycle. Well, probably without going into too much detail, my brother asked me if I wanted to ride with him across the United States to Greece and to visit a friend of his. And I said, well, you mean like Portland to New York and then fly to London and then ride to Greece? And yeah. And he said, well, how long? I said, how long will this take? And he said, about a year and a half. So we did. And that was kind of changed my life. That trip, you know, I had language, culture, history, geography, all those different things. And when I came back from that, I was pretty smitten with riding a bike.
That must have been a life-changing experience.
Very much.
About how old were you then?
20.
Okay. All right. So still kind of wet behind the ears. Mm-hmm. What a fortunate thing to have happen to you, or to do.
Yeah, it was great to have an older brother that was so kind and would be willing to ask his younger brother,
yes,
8 years apart, to have that kind of an adventure.
Yes. So what kind of riding do you enjoy now? We're just going to take a huge leap here.
Well, anything, but I spend a lot of time just doing a daily ride, kind of a practice. My wife and I tour a lot on the tandem, so we'll load up a trailer and take the tandem. And 2 years ago we rode to Yosemite, down the Cascades. So we do a lot of tandem riding. I do a lot of gravel riding on
Okay.
a gravel bike.
Uh-huh.
So that's the other area that I do quite a bit.
How long have you been into the gravel riding?
Well, I have a history of cyclocross,
Okay.
which is kind of the original gravel riding. Started cyclocross in the early 80s with Tim Rutledge here in Portland, and created the first cyclocross series here
Okay.
that's now very famous, and everybody talks about Portland cyclocross.
Yes.
Well, Tim Rutledge was really the person who made that begin to happen, and so I worked with him, and I actually promoted the series for about 4 years.
So we'll talk about other things that you've done too, but you're like way ahead of all of us. You're like a decade or so getting into these things, and the rest of us are straggling behind getting into it. That's really interesting. So let's talk about, do you have like a favorite ride right now? I know you bike commute and that sort of thing. Do you have a favorite ride that you might share with us?
Well, every year around my birthday, which is the end of October, if the weather is good, I like to ride from my house in southeast Portland to Timberline and back. And it's just a really nice way to honor the mountain. You know, it's an amazing, you get up there in the parking lot and there's just this beautiful mountain. So, you know, the weather has to be good enough, so it has to be warm enough. And this year it was good enough. So on Saturday the 28th, I rode up to Timberline, and it was an amazingly beautiful ride. It's 130 miles. So just a nice way to celebrate your birthday and honor that beautiful mountain.
Yes, Michael, that is just a great way. Okay, so let's talk about getting fit on a new bike. Somebody's new to cycling, and so most bike shops have some kind of a little fit center that you pick out your bike. They're not going to put you on a giant bike or a teeny bike. They're going to kind of fit it to your body, and they'll kind of fit it there at the shop. So what do you do over and above what might happen at the bike shop?
Well, the fitting that goes on in a bike shop is, a lot of it is because of me. In other words, I created a lot of the training programs that exist to help shops learn how to do bike fitting. So a lot of the protocol I developed years ago, and I taught different companies like Serata and Trek and some of the different programs that are out there. So the shops have done a better job over the years, but the problem there is that they don't give it enough time. So, you know, to do a really good fitting takes 2 to 2.5 to 3 hours to do a really good fitting. And the shops get, I think, a little antsy with that amount of time, and it takes a commitment.
Sure. And you're right. You were you were on the forefront of this whole bike fitting notion. I remember, I mean, I got a bike fit way back when, and you were the person in Portland at that time, and you were going around the country teaching others. Yeah.
Well, it's just something that if you're going to buy a bike and you're going to sell a bike, you really need to find out how to put that person on the bike correctly, because everybody's body is different. They have different injuries. They have different backgrounds. They have different goals. So, you know, spending the time to interview them and test them and do a screen on their body to see how they move is really important.
Yeah.
You know, if you want the end goal to be good, it takes time to get to know them and to figure out what they're really doing.
Right. So let's talk a little bit technical. And on your website, there's this notion of stack and reach and the XY handlebar coordinates. And why is understanding that concept, which I do not understand that concept, why is that important when you're looking for a new bike? What is that all about?
Well, in the old days, we'd figure out what your bike was supposed to be, but we had to use all of the different angles of the seat tube, top tube, down tube, all these measurements, 20-some different measurements, and it was very confusing. And then Trek measured one way, Specialized measured another way, Raleigh measured a different way. So for the consumer, I used to joke with the companies and say, can you guys make it any harder to buy a bike? I mean, you don't want to make it too easy for the consumer to buy a bike. So stack and reach is kind of like latitude, longitude, straight line up, straight line forwards. So it helps definitively describe the size of the bike. Mm-hmm. And it's very simple. You can boil all those other measurements down to where is the head tube of the bike and where are the handlebars of the bike. So it's a much more simple, and everybody has adopted it. Finally, the bike industry is working together and deciding, hey, we want to sell bikes.
Yeah.
It's important to us to make it easier for the consumer. And that's huge breakthrough for the bike industry.
Well, thanks for all your nagging. I'm sure that was at least a small part of it.
Yeah.
So as a bike consumer then, I might find that one particular brand of bicycle really doesn't work well for my body just because of the way that they have designed the bike, whereas another brand might fit better for me. And so you do have a program where if I'm looking for a new bike, I could come talk to you and you would help me know what to look for, so I don't spend a bunch of money on a bike that is never going to fit me correctly. Would that be true?
Yeah, we can put you on a fit bike and do the fitting on a fit bike and boil those numbers to the stack and reach numbers. Mm-hmm. And then we can do it while you're there. We can look at the computer and look at Trek or whatever manufacturer you want to look at, and it'll have each model and it'll have stack and reach.
I see.
So it'll help us figure out, oh, this bike's a close fit for you. Here's an option for you to go look at and test ride. Good.
So that's a good starting point. So based on that, that's the new bike idea. We're going to go to a safety video, and then we're going to come back and talk about what if I've already got the bike? How can you help with that? So we're going to go to a safety video, and then we'll come back and talk with Michael a little bit about what if you already own a bike, what can be done to make that bicycle fit better with your body and your particular body style and the riding style. So let's watch a safety video right now.
Skull, dome, melon, nut. No matter what you call your head, I think we can all agree it's worth protecting, right?
Yeah!
When you're doing something cool like riding a bike, you'll find that hazards are everywhere. From car doors to gravel on the street, to dogs crossing your path. Yeah, even the cute ones. Crashes can happen, even to those with awesome biking skills. In a fight between your head and the pavement always wins. So it makes sense to protect your skull and the valuable gray matter inside by wearing a certified helmet. Think you look like a dork? No way. There are plenty of cool looking helmets out there with tons of styles and colors to choose from. There's downhill and BMX helmets, mountain bike helmets, road helmets, and racing helmets. Whatever style you choose, just make sure it's for the kind of riding you're doing, and that it's safety certified. Visit any good bike shop or sporting goods store if you're unsure what kind of helmet you need. They'll have people there to help you make the right choice. Even a certified helmet has to fit right to work properly. So when picking your size, make sure it doesn't wobble around or fall off when you nod yes or shake no, even when the straps are undone. Some helmets come with extra pads you can attach or a nifty crank to help you get dialed in. See? So once you've found the right helmet that fits you, remember the 2v1 rule. With your helmet sitting level on your head, you should have no more than 2 fingers between your eyebrows and the bottom of the helmet. The side strap should form a V shape just below your ears. Adjust the chin strap so only 1 finger fits under there, like so. When you open your mouth wide like this, the helmet should still feel comfortable. Taking care of your new helmet is easy. Just keep it in a cool, dry place, away from excessive heat or direct sunlight. That's bad for the foamy stuff that protects your brain box. Clean off any grossness with a mild cleaner, like dish soap and warm water. A certified helmet will last 3 to 5 years, but after that, it's time to get a new one. And if you have a crash or there are any visible signs of damage, your helmet is officially toast. There are no accidents, only crashes, but nobody has one on purpose. So protect your brains and wear a helmet when you ride.
This important message is brought to you by CanBike Manitoba, the Manitoba Cycling Association, and the Manitoba government. Have fun. Ride safely.
Well, Northwest Bicycle Safety Council is sure all about bike safety and definitely having a helmet on your head that fits properly. So we're back with Michael Sylvester, and we're just kind of picking his brain about how to be comfortable on your bicycle, because if you're comfortable, you'll probably ride a lot more. And so we're going to talk now about, if you already own a bike, how can a bike fitter such as Michael help you fit better on your bike so that it's comfortable? So if I was going to come in, Michael, with my bike, why don't you kind of walk me through what I might expect when I come to your shop? Bringing my bike in and bring my bike shoes, because you're going to look at my pedals and my shoes and all that. What would happen?
So most importantly, the number one type of fitting that I do is people who have an existing bike. So that's more common than any other of the fittings that I do. And you and I would make an appointment. I would tell you what to bring, how to get to my studio, and then usually I try to get people to call me when they get there, and I go down and try to help them bring their stuff up the stairs into the studio. And then we sit down and do the most important part of the fitting, which is the interview. And I really emphasize that because it's the time that you and I get to connect and figure out, what are you doing? What do you want to do today? Because yes, it's a bike fitting, but within the fitting, what is your connection? What are you trying to achieve there? And that's something that you really have to find out and understand as a bike fitter to make sure you're keying in on that. So.
And then what kind of equipment might I see, or what will you use to make sure, to figure out what needs to be done to make me more comfortable on my bike? Or, you know, I want a cyclocross race, or I'm a bike commuter, or that, so those are the kinds of things that you narrow down, right?
Right. So we're finding out what kind of riding you're doing, what's your history, what's your athletic background, what kind of medical history do you have? Do you have injuries? Do you have broken bones? Do you have any surgeries? Do you have knees or back issues? So then we'll do a series of tests, kind of like a screen, like a physical therapist would do. And we'll look at, how do you move? How strong are you? What is your alignment? I'll have you stand up and I'll look at how your alignment is. Is your head forward? You know, do you have good posture? We'll go through a complete screen. And then I put your bike on an elevated platform and put your bike up there and have you get on, and we'll take a picture of you so that I can put that picture on the computer, and then you and I can look at it together, and I can kind of show you, here's what I see. And then we can make a plan or a strategy about, okay, now what are we going to do?
Okay. So, and again, you can't delve into it too much because it's pretty individual. It's very customized. It's not a cookie cutter thing. It's each piece is unique to that person. So part of, I don't know, I always tell people wherever your body is hitting the bike or touching the bike, that's where you're likely to have pain, like your hands on the handlebar, your behind on the seat, and you've got a shoe here, your feet on the pedals. So let's talk about the feet and the pedals and all that. There's a lot to that. Tell us about what you've got going on here and problems that you see with people and not having their feet right on the pedals.
Yeah, so like building a house, the most important part is the foundation. So you think of a person on a bicycle, the feet are the foundation. And so in a fitting, we start at the feet and we build our way up from the feet, and that's the path of how we do a fitting. The number one problem that we see come in is feet. And I think it has to do with that cycling shoes used to be leather, and in the early days the sole was leather and the upper was leather, and you ask the store person, how should it fit? And they would tell you, as tight as you can get it, because they knew that within a month the leather would stretch and it would fit well. And I grew up in that time frame where we had leather shoes and leather chamois and wool clothing. And I remember having those leather shoes. But now, with the materials that we have in shoes now, they don't stretch.
Right.
But the shoes are still made on those lasts, those ideas, traditions. And I think a lot of the shoes are much too narrow, causing the feet to be squeezed together, causing hot spots and pain in people's feet. So I see a lot of problems with feet.
Well, and don't we, I mean, I hear people say, well, you want, you know, you want those shoes as tight as you can get them so that when you pull up on the pedal, you know, you're one with the bike kind of thing. And yeah, that does cause pain and hot spots and things.
Yeah, well, there's some misnomers there. The whole pull-up idea is not particularly true.
Okay.
But I don't want to bore you with the science there. I will just say it's a proven fact. And the way that feet work, having the toes spread apart and more open, able to have better balance and better proprioception is really important. So having a more comfortable shoe is critical.
And so what have you got there in front of you? You've got a prototype of a different kind of a shoe.
Yeah, it's a prototype of a shoe that looks like your foot.
Yeah.
Rather than looks like a shoe.
So it's real much broader in the toe area.
It's broader in the toe area. It's more rounded on the front. This particular one is a prototype. It's just a bamboo sole. Leather uppers. We're using materials that allow us to do a prototype. But the shape of the shoe, the broadness of the front, allow the toes to spread apart and create more power, allowing the foot to work more naturally. So eventually, as we get the materials figured out, it'll look like a more traditional shoe, but the shape will still be a foot shape.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. It really does. So we all ride all different kinds of bicycles, you know, recumbents and hybrids and all different kinds of bikes. What are some of the predominant issues you find on some of the different kinds of bikes that people ride?
Well, I would say the traditional road bike with the drop handlebars have the biggest stigma of people saying, oh, I don't need that kind of bike. It's a race bike. But that's not really true. It's just a bike that has curved handlebars that give us more hand options. It's actually the most ergonomic handlebar there is. So if you move that handlebar into the right alignment, it can be really good. So, but it has a bit of a stigma. People will bail off of that bike because they feel like it's too aggressive, and they'll go to a hybrid. And the hybrid has a straighter bar, and the straighter bar causes them to have problems with their wrists and pressure on their hands because they only have one hand position.
Right.
So they can't move around very much. You can put a bar end on there, but it causes some wrist issues. And then from there, they might bail to a recumbent. And recumbents, you know, you're seated all the time.
Yeah.
You have no options there. So, and the recumbent captures your butt and it captures your feet. And so you can put a lot of leverage on the in between the knees. So it has some disadvantages there. You have to be careful that your gearing is, your cadence is high enough, because that's a lot of torque on the knee joints. So those are kind of things that we see.
Yeah, and I've had that experience where people look at a road bike and they're immediately, oh no, that's too much bike for me. No, I can't be in that position. You know, give me some flat handlebars, then I'll be happy. So you're pointing out that not necessarily.
Right.
And so you can kind of help people. So some of you're kind of a counselor too, aren't you?
Educator.
Educator, all right.
Yeah, and in fact, I think a great deal of my work is education. People will come in for a bike fitting, and when they leave, they thank me and say, wow, I really learned a lot. Like, I didn't know that I didn't understand that. So it might be form, it might be posture, but they're learning a lot about how they, because no one tells you how to sit on a bike.
No.
There's no story behind it.
Or, like you're saying, we ride with our friends and maybe we get some misinformation about things.
Right. Yeah, the racer influence, we're all emulating the racers or thinking that we're, you know, want to be like the racers. Or
So, aging and bike fit. Why is one bike fit not sufficient for hopefully a long lifetime of riding a bike?
I have several thousand clients in my history, and I have two in particular who I really appreciate because their minds, they think forwards, and every 2 years, within the 2 years, they'll come in and they'll go, hey, I'm just doing my checkup. I'm aging. I want to stay ahead of it. So look at my position. Tell me how I'm doing. Change whatever we need to change to keep current. And that's really amazing because most people come in when they have pain. My number one thing that brings people in is pain.
Yeah.
So having two clients who come in just to do a checkup, and I would say doing it every 2 years or less, year and a half, is really wise.
Yeah. So like you say, stay ahead of it. Why wait until you're in pain?
In pain.
Because you're not going to ride. So what kinds of things change as we age that impact the way we fit on our bicycle? What changes? So
the things that I see the most can be injury related. So if you had injuries when you were young, the old saying that the chickens come home to roost is really true. And then tissue is changing, your flexibility is changing. All of those things are, we're not getting younger and stronger. We're going the other direction. And it's slow, but it's definitely affects. I tell people, reach over and put your hands flat on the floor with your knees straight. That'll tell you that you're not the same as when you were 18, or things change quickly.
Yes. And I think, I know you were at the Portland Wheelman Touring Club meeting, and you were asked, what do you most commonly see with your senior clients?
Denial.
Yeah.
They don't want to, who wants to admit that they're not? We look in the mirror and we look pretty good, and we think of ourselves as being that same person, but then we go out and do a hard ride and we wake up the next morning and go, whoa, that truck must have run me over.
Yeah.
I don't feel like that same person.
Yeah. How can we fix this?
Recovery takes longer. All those things are changing.
Well, we're going to go to another bike safety video, and then we'll come back again and talk with Michael Sylvester some more about being comfortable on the bike and touch on training and yoga as possibilities of ways to be comfortable on the bike and keep your body fit. And so let's go to a quick video about bicycle safety, and then we'll be back with Michael.
Maybe you ride to school. Maybe you ride for fun. Either way, when you're on a bike, you want to get where you're going safely. To do that, you need to remember a few key things. Be visible, follow the rules of the road, and be predictable.
Okay, that's it, we're done. Well, not done exactly. We might have a few more things to say.
When we say be visible, what we mean is be easy to see.
Drivers should be watching for you, and they are, but do your part. Make sure your bike is ready for riding, and that includes having working lights and reflectors.
In the daytime, wear bright colors. At night, wear something reflective, either clothing or gear. And dress for safety. If you're wearing loose pants, for example, strap down the pant leg on the chain side of the bike, like this, so it won't get caught while you're riding. And wear a bike helmet when you ride. It may or may not be the law where you live, but it's always a good idea.
Of course, part of the idea of wearing a helmet is not to put it to the test, not to have a wreck in the first place. And that's all about where you choose to ride and how you do it.
Bikes are considered vehicles. So when you're riding a bike on the road, follow the same rules as car drivers do. Just like a driver, you need to look for and obey road signs and traffic signals. We're talking stop signs, yield signs, red lights, and so on. Keep to the right, but far enough from parked cars so you don't get clipped by a door that opens suddenly. Usually that's at least 3 feet.
But what happens when you don't have 3 feet? When the lane narrows, for example? That's when you need to take the lane.
Taking the lane means that you move into the center of the lane, just like a car. You should do this when the lane narrows or when you're coming up to an intersection or some other kind of turn. In these situations, the center of the lane is usually the best place to be. When it's time to change lanes, you should look for traffic, signal, and then move one lane at a time. Traffic will always be changing, so it's important to look and signal each time you want to change lanes.
Anytime you're uncomfortable with a traffic situation, you have choices.
You can get off the bike and walk on the sidewalk. You can choose a different route, one that has bike lanes, or slower traffic. Or you can use a combination of bike and transit. But no matter where you're riding, a road or a trail, always watch out for people walking. Move out of their way, and let them know when you're about to pass them on the left.
On your left.
If there's one thing drivers count on, it's predictability. So one of the best ways to be safe is to be predictable. For example, use hand signals before you turn or stop. Ride in the same direction the cars are going, with the flow of traffic, not against it. And don't assume that drivers will see you just because you see them.
You already know this part, but we're gonna say it anyway. Put your phone away while you're riding.
You don't want to be talking or texting because you need to be alert and paying attention to what you're doing. Same goes for earbuds or headphones. You need to hear what's going on around you, so leave them in your bag for later. Keep both hands on the handlebars unless you're signaling, and keep your eyes open for hazards, things like wet roads, gravel, debris, anything that can mess with your ride.
As we said up front, it really comes down to 3 things. Be visible, be predictable, and follow the same rules as a car.
Make sure that drivers can see you, that you let them know what you're about to do, and that you're following the rules of the road. That's it. Have a good ride.
So before we get back to Michael after watching that safety video, I want to talk about some fun events because I want to encourage cyclists to ride all year. Many of you worked hard all summer and built up kind of a base. So if you can keep riding at least a little bit during the winter, you know, you kind of keep that a little bit, and then come next year, you're not starting from ground zero again. And we'll maybe ask Michael if he's got any advice too on how to stay fit. But I do want to encourage you to ride, and there's a lot of fun activities during the holidays. Just not super long rides, but great fun rides. So first of all, on November 28th is Bike the Lights, and that's from 5:30 to 9:30. It's a holiday tradition. It's PIR, Portland International Raceway, and you can take the whole family out to the racetrack and ride around there to that winter wonderland, all the holiday lights there. No cars are out there, so it's very safe, and you just ride around and look at the lights, and it's just a lot of fun. So another thing to do is go to pwtc.com, so Portland Wheelman Touring Club, and our website, and the ride calendar. December 10th, the Holiday Express ride, and that's a regular bicycle ride that kind of goes around inner city somewhat, but it'll be sure and hit the East Bank Esplanade when the steam engine is down there. So you'll be riding your bike right alongside an old steam engine, and a lot of cyclists find that to be a fun tradition during the holiday season. On December 16th, I'm going to lead a bike ride to Bike Craft, and that's at the Bike Farm, a bike shop kind of in the Lloyd district, more or less, of Portland. So even if you don't want to ride, if it's a hideous day that day, go on down there and check out Bike Craft. So it's all that weekend of December 16th. It's a lot of vendors in at the Bike Farm selling just all kinds of bicycle-oriented type things. It's a lot of fun, a lot of clever ideas, and a great time to get gifts for your bicycle-loving friends and relatives. And if you just Google Bike Craft, you'll find information about that. December 17th, that same weekend, is an evening bike ride put on by one of the Portland Wheelmen, where it's just in North Portland and just riding your bicycle around and looking at different holiday lights in North Portland. And Portland Wheelman has a bicycle ride every day of the year. So there's even a Christmas morning ride. It's called Christmas Morning Coffee Quest. And so if you're not doing anything else, you can go out and ride your bike on Christmas morning. I encourage you this time of year to make sure that you have lights. So kind of give this some forethought a little bit about how are you going to be visible. What kind of lights do you need to have on your bike, both legally and just what makes you comfortable safety-wise, and then make sure that your clothing and things have some kind of reflectivity and bright clothes. So let's get back to Michael Sylvester, and he's trying to help us figure out how to be comfortable on our bikes. So let's talk now about our bodies, and because that's part of the whole thing too. That's the engine. So you get the bike all set up for the cyclists and hopefully coordinated, but the body might not be quite optimum. You are a trainer. What kinds of things do you help the cyclists with?
So often when we do the fitting, the information that we find out in the process of interviewing you and doing a screen, I might find out that you have tight hamstrings, tight hip flexors, tight quadriceps. So if I have enough time during a fitting, I may show you those things, or I may say, you know, these are things that if you want to come back and schedule a time, you know, I'll charge you, but we can come back and work on those things one-on-one. And they'll come back and I'll take their iPhone and I'll videotape them doing the different poses. So I use yoga to teach the poses for those hamstrings, hip flexors, quadriceps, whatever it might be. So that's a nice way to give them homework, I call it, because you're a moving target. You can't, bike fit is today.
Yes.
Tomorrow it changes, the next day it changes. It's always moving a little bit. So we're trying to help people improve and get better.
And and optimize that engine so that...
Optimize that engine.
When I know that you sometimes refer people to other professionals, such as a chiropractor or an acupuncturist, what kinds of circumstances might prompt you to make a referral like that? And who do you refer to? Not specifically, but...
So a lot of physical therapy, probably number one is physical therapy. Sometimes a chiropractor, sometimes an acupuncturist. And, when you run out of your own knowledge, then professionalism says you have to send them to someone who has that knowledge. So I refer a lot. I have really good relationships with a lot of the people in Portland, a lot of the physical therapists and different clinicians, and I think it's wonderful because you're trying to help that person achieve their goal.
Yeah.
And no one has all the pieces. No one is everything. So when you get to the end of your expertise, you got to keep going and say, hey, you really need to go see a physical therapist or a chiropractor. And, I have, because of all my injuries, I have some really good, I know they're really good PTs, and I know they're really good chiropractors because they've worked on me. So that's very common.
Yeah, and good for you. And so I do want to ask you, this being the winter months, some people ride rain or shine, and their mileage isn't affected at all by the weather. I'm a person that's more fair weather. How can I maintain my fitness, my flexibility, a lot that I've worked so hard to gain all summer? How can I maintain my fitness? What kind of cross training would you recommend?
So a couple things. First, if you're going to ride in the winter, I think it's really important to set your bike up correctly and have fenders on your bike, full fenders, and have the clothing and the lighting that you need to be safe. Because, I rode here tonight from southeast Portland over here, and you can never have too many lights.
No.
You just feel like, whoa, those cars are big and it's dark. And so having really good lighting, critical, having the equipment to feel comfortable and warm and dry. In Oregon, you're never going to stay dry.
Right.
So forget about it. Stay warm. That's the important part. And then, what can you do to keep that fitness? I would say, you're going to ride less in the winter on purpose. You don't want to ride, like when it gets cold, you can't ride as far. It's dangerous to ride up into the West Hills and descend out of there at 38 degrees. You freeze to death.
Yeah.
Or have an accident.
Right.
So you're going to ride less. You might walk more, or you might hike more. Doing other activities, yoga, those kind of things, let your body have a better balance as well.
Good point. So maybe you can work on some other things during the winter, like you say, to try to maintain balance in your life. So speaking of balance, no pun intended, but you're into yoga. So you do. How did you come to be? What drew you to yoga? And again, you were way ahead of the curve. All these things, you're way ahead of all of us. Before it was the cool thing to do, and we all figured out, yeah, yoga should be part of my life. You were doing it.
Yeah, well, when I was first bike racing, of course, I fell off my bike a lot, and that's a team effort. You have a whole bunch of people in a close proximity, and they knock each other down. And I broke the neck of the femur, and so that was a major break, and they kind of said, well, we can pin it back together, but you probably won't race your bike again. And I was like, that doesn't sound good. So I started working with a physical therapist who was also a yoga teacher, and they said to me after a few visits, they said, well, you should get in our yoga class. And I, this was in the 80s.
Right.
And I was like, yoga? Somebody should ask me if I want to be an astronaut. Like, that might be a similar idea. I just didn't think of yoga. But I did. I started taking yoga class and loved it and just got better and started racing my bike again. And so that led to them asking me if I wanted to teach yoga, which was just astounding. Like, I can't teach yoga. I can barely do yoga. But I could, and it was really fun.
Well, and you sent us a picture. It's on the screen right now. It's a huge class. Looks like primarily males. What does that picture depict? What is that?
That picture is from one of the training seminars teaching 50 Trek dealers how to do bike fitting.
Okay.
So how do you teach biomechanics? Do you give them all a book and tell them to read this on their lunch break? No, you make them do yoga. You make them feel their body. So we used yoga to teach the biomechanics of bike fitting, which was, here I am thinking about teaching biomechanics, and I was like, well, how am I going to teach this? Well, I'm a yoga teacher. That'll be perfect. So I meshed the two together, and people loved it. It was a great thing. It was one of the top things that we did in those fitting programs.
I bet. That's really interesting. I'm fairly new to yoga, and just that whole idea about, being more mindful of your body. And you're right, a mechanic might be more into the technical part, but really it's about the body. So that's a great way to kind of help them see that.
The dealers were mechanics.
Yeah.
They were people who were drawn to bicycles and mechanical things.
Sure.
But then the shops all decided that they wanted to come to these fit seminars. Well, how do you teach someone who has no medical background about the body?
Yeah.
You use their body. And we did it really kindly and really gently, and they loved it. It stuck.
Yeah, I'm sure. I would imagine that many of them have
took up yoga.
Taking up yoga, yeah. So what are some of the benefits you see of yourself personally, or maybe some clients, practicing yoga and cycling? What is kind of some of the correlations that you see? Balance, flexibility, that sort of thing?
So, two things. Balance, what does balance mean? Is that us balancing the shoe so it doesn't fall over? Or is it learning to balance the things in our life? So that's one way of looking at it. And then yoga, the practice of yoga in America is, health clubs and thinking about the health of your body, when in the East, it's a spiritual practice. But in the East, it is the pursuit of mindfulness, of being aware of the mind, aware of the body, and bringing them together. So it's a wonderful thing that we don't need to fear. I think people bring up the word yoga, and some of the people in the fitting seminars at first were like, yoga? We're going to do yoga? That's like some religion or something.
Right, I'm going to be converted to something, yes.
So.
And you mentioned earlier, like hip flexors and that sort of thing, that kind of loosen those up, or your hamstrings, because most of us sit all day. And so then to get on a bike and be able to use your hips and thighs and all that, and lean over, I don't know, just that flexibility.
Right. Well, an awareness of what are you doing with your body, what's happening on the bike. How should I be sitting on the bike? Most people don't know. I could go to a bike shop with a quiz and say, fill out this quiz. Describe to me how to sit on the bike and why. And those people work in the industry, and they wouldn't be able to tell me that.
I'm sure not, yeah. Yeah.
They might have an idea of how they should sit, but they couldn't tell me why.
Right. And if something was radically wrong, they might be able to point that out. But you're right, not to finesse it to the like you would to make it fit.
Yeah, so it's an educational, a lot of the fitting I do is helping someone understand their body a little better so that they can work with their body and get more comfortable and get more out of their body. A lot of people come in and they work at a desk on their computer and their shoulders are all up here. And, they look in the mirror and I say, take your shoulders away from your ears. And they're like, whoa, that feels really good. First time all day. So, sometimes just helping melt people a little bit and helping them relax.
So this is very all-encompassing, isn't it?
You can't separate it.
You're right. But I don't know. You're just really bringing that home. So somehow I'm kind of doubling back, but we never talked about saddles, like the bike seat. What tips would you give to a person for picking out a good bike seat? What are we looking for?
It's a great question. Number one most difficult fitting thing, period, the seat. How do I tell you which seat?
Yeah.
And the companies would have you believe that they can have you sit on this little thing, this pad, and it'll take the imprint of your butt, and then it'll tell you how wide your sit bones are, and that tells you which seat you should be on. And that's a nice idea if it worked, but it doesn't really encompass. The only way that you can know that your seat works is riding the seat. So the idea of a saddle library or having the ability to buy a seat and then say to the shop, hey, if this doesn't work, can I bring this back and exchange it for another seat? That's the way to go. And so having a relationship with the shop and saying, can I do this? If the shop is smart, they'll say yes, bring it back in good condition and we'll allow you to exchange it. Because there's no way you can shortcut actually riding
it. And what works for me may not work for somebody else. Now, some of these saddles are women-specific. Might a woman-specific saddle work for a man?
The bike industry has done, the marketing people out there in the world are smiling right now because they know that we've created all these tools to market things and say women specific. When some men have women's pelvises, some women have men's pelvises, there's a bell curve. So sometimes a woman's seat works for a man, and sometimes a male seat works for a woman. But there are other things to think about, and your torso angle of how, are you sitting upright, are you leaning way forward? It changes where the weight is on the seat. So if you're more upright, you're going to have a wider seat and a more padded seat. If you're very forwards on your position, you're going to have a harder seat and a narrower seat often because your weight is more forward.
So again, in the interview, you're going to, what kind of riding are you doing, and looking at you sitting on the bike, and you're going to start.
How much weight is here from the waist up? If it's a big guy with a barrel chest and he weighs 250 pounds and most of it's from the waist up, that's a lot of weight.
Yeah.
So that's going to affect the seat as well.
So all things to consider, and I know that some bike shops are going to that, try it and you can bring it back, because it's just not easy, and they're, it's an investment. They're not cheap, so you can't keep going back for more if you can't trade it in.
And the customer, hopefully, whatever shop they're working with, we want to make the customer feel like we want to help them.
Yeah.
We're there to help them.
Right, because if we love cycling, we'll keep coming back for more.
And your bike should be fun.
Yes, it should be fun. So Michael, we just have a couple of minutes left. Can I ask you to just give some words of encouragement to cyclists or potential cyclists about being comfortable on their bike?
Many people come to me and say, I ask them, do you have problems? And they say, well, I have the normal problems of pain. You know, my neck hurts, my hands hurt, my butt hurts. And I'm like, those aren't normal. You can solve those. So the encouragement would be work with someone who you like and work at it and keep going back until you get to the point where your bike's really fun and you think, wow, I'm going to get out of work and go ride my bike because it's a blast. It doesn't have to be painful.
So some good things to think about. I think Michael has shared a lot of great information with us. And going into winter, you know, this is setting a goal to make yourself more comfortable on your bike this winter and then move into that new cycling season, setting great cycling goals for the new year. And I hope you remember some of those ideas for winter riding, great rides coming up, great events coming up. Many of us here in Portland do love our bicycling. So I want to thank you for joining us and just share quickly that Bruce Buffington, who is a member of Northwest Bicycle Safety Council, and myself belong to Portland Wheelman. We have bicycle rides most every month, and they tend to be easier, slower, welcoming rides. So I encourage you to go to pwtc.com, look at the ride calendar, and look for our names, and join us on bike rides. So be safe out there. Get yourself lit up so you're safe. Thank you for joining us.